He started his career in the Royal Navy as a weapons engineer. I know he served in the Antarctic. He currently works in the power distribution industry, and has been in love with map collecting for the last 25 years, recently moving on to globes, which I can regard as a rather more expensive way of fulfilling that interest. And he's recently joined our executive committee at IMCoS. Mark's going to be sharing about an unusual map about the moon. Over to you.
Thanks, Mike, and hello to everybody. And I see Jenny's eating crisps. I'm glad I'm not the only one. Hello to Jenny. Right, next slide, please. This is I've got two items on my agenda, a short biography and the main topic, the moon and infatuation. Next slide, please. Short biography. I started my career in the Royal Navy as a weapons engineer. I'm currently a manager for London Underground, working in the electrical power distribution area. I've been working in the electrical industry for approximately 39 years. My love for map collecting started over 25 years ago with a trip to the Carson Clark Gallery in Edinburgh in Scotland. Sadly, Mr. Carson is no longer with us and the shop has closed down. I also collect globes and cartographic reference books and material. I've been a member of IMCoS for around 17 years and I'm currently the General Secretary for IMCoS. My collecting area of interest is Antarctica and the Southern Hemisphere. Next slide, please. So the moon, around 4.5 billion years old is our moon, and it's arguably our nearest celestial object of infatuation and beauty to us here on Earth. Humans have studied the moon first with telescopes, then with radar from the 1940s. The 1960s space race between the US and the Soviet Union accelerated the world's interest in the moon. This interest sparked the creation of moon globes by companies like Educational Frontiers, Rand McNally, Arthur Whiteman's Lunosphere Productions, Denoy Geppert, Columbus Verleg, and more recently Astro Reality, to name but a few. In fact, versions of the moon are still being constructed by new and bespoke companies today. The earliest scientific map of the moon was produced by Giovanni Cassini in the mid-17th century. Cassini used a telescope to study and catalogue the moon's surface. Our moon rotates on its axis on synchronization with the Earth. Therefore, you'll never see the opposite side of the moon from the Earth. The dark side of the moon, as it's known, is an area that can only be visualized by a visiting spacecraft, satellite, or probe that can circumnavigate this area. The first pictures of the dark hemisphere was captured by a Russian manned Luna 3 mission in 1959. The pictures of which actually were very grainy, so much so that cartographic representations of those photos were very difficult to construct. Any constructed moon maps and moon globes prior to this mission showed no accurate detail of this area. Next slide, please. Sir Patrick Alfred Caldwell Moore, CBE, Hons FRS, FRAS, survived on our Earth from 1923 to 2012. Sir Patrick was the president of the British Astronomical Association and presenter of BBC's Sky at Night. Apart from astronomy, Sir Patrick demonstrated a keen interest in our moon. He felt that there was a lack of detailed maps of the moon available and decided to map it for himself, meticulously map it. He kept many lunar notebooks during his research, using his own telescopes to observe between 1932 and 69. He bought, incidentally, better and better telescopes, and obviously his observations got better as a result. Sir Patrick discovered a number of previously unidentified craters and mares due to the meticulous way he studied every detail and shadow. A mare, by the way, is the darker area. areas that you see on our moon. So if you go out and look at the moon tonight, if you can see it, those darker areas are called mares. Because of his subject matter expertise, Sir Patrick offered his own support at the request of the Russian Federation, the USSR, whom held him in very high regard. Next slide, please. Sir Patrick's moon map. So once he'd completed his studies, he created this moon map, which you see on this slide. And this is a 1969 large hand-signed special commemorative issue moon map from my own collection, complete with hologram, celebrating the Apollo missions and space exploration in general. Towards the end of Sir Patrick's life, he became unable to sign his maps, so he used a stamp instead. Next slide, please. The Soviet Luna 3 module. In the 50s, the ability to send rockets into space was being realized. The image on the right was the first image of the far side of the moon captured by the Soviet lunar expedition in 1959. If we can stay on this slide for a moment. Prior to that, most of the first expeditions into space, they couldn't actually navigate on a horizontal plane around the lunar surface. So they formed this figure of 8 pattern. And that's where most of the photographs came from. It wasn't till the Luna 10 mission in '66 that they actually managed to orbit the moon. Next slide, please. Educational Frontiers, an American company. Educational Frontiers Inc. was an American company who marketed objects to promote educational components for schools. They commissioned a globe manufacturer called Nystrom Incorporated to make some exceptionally rare 7-inch raised relief resin man on the moon globes. That's what they were called, celebrating the inaugural 1969 moon landings by Neil Armstrong of the Apollo 11 space mission. These orbs were made in limited numbers and given as complimentary gifts to their best customers. Many have not survived and they've become hard to find. Sometimes the orb can be found on its own as the delicate plastic stands were prone to damage. Shown in the photograph here are a 1969 and a 1970 version of these globes that are in my collection. Next slide, please. Arthur Whiteman, Lunar Sphere Productions Limited, working from his, this guy's really interesting, working from his cottage in Penzance, Cornwall, England. Mr. Whiteman hand-built raised relief terrestrial and lunar globes that specialized in moon globes. In 1969, he started making 10 glass fiber globes a week for around 2 years. It took him 2 years to make the first 24-inch prototype prior to these sales. The 8-inch and the 10-inch moon globes came packaged with stickers and paint pots so that purchasers could decorate the moon surface to instruction. The 24-inch moon globes, however, were pre-decorated by Mr. Whiteman himself. Limited
2 minutes, Mark.
Sorry?
2 minutes.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. Limited in numbers and sold to universities, NASA, Apollo astronauts like Colonel Frank Borman of the Apollo 8 mission, and the US White House President Nixon, who was in office at the time. The 24-inch moon globe was used as a prop in the James Bond movie, Diamonds Are Forever. You can find it in an edition of the Time Life magazine with astronaut Jim Lovell of the Apollo 13 mission, and a terrestrial version of the Earth made by Whiteman can be seen in the Vienna Globe Museum. There's also a short Pathé movie available on YouTube called The Man Who Sold the Moon. So anybody who wants to watch it, just type that into The Man Who Sold the Moon into your search engine and that will come up, which is interesting and informative. Little is known about Mr. Whiteman as he slipped into obscurity as the interest in moon landings waned. I have a 24-inch and a 12-inch Lunar Sphere production moon globe, which I'm very proud of in my collection. Next slide, please. There we go. You can see the 12-inch version there. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Mark. It really comes home to me the width of interest of our members and the friends of our members as we hear such a variety of things. But actually, we're going to have another China one, and we're going to have another world one. So please do stay watching, listening, whatever you're doing.